The Valley's Hungry Echoes by Silas Blackwood. The vastness of Lamar Valley still haunts my waking dreams, a canvas of endless sagebrush and distant, saw-toothed peaks under a sky that could bruise from horizon to horizon. I remember the silence then, a deep, breathing quiet that held the promise of wildness, the kind of silence that made the rustle of a mouse in the undergrowth sound like a shout. I was there for the elk, mostly, their graceful forms moving like whispers across the open land. But it was the quiet that got to you, eventually. A quiet that felt like it was listening. The air would change as dusk crept in, painting the western sky in shades of fire and fading rose. That's when the valley would truly awaken. The coyotes would start their yipping chorus, a familiar sound, almost comforting in its wildness. But then came the other sounds, the ones that burrowed under your skin. Deeper, more resonant howls that seemed to roll off the cliffs, echoing in ways that felt deliberate. Not the scattered cries of a pack, but something unified, almost a single drawn-out lament. It made the hairs on my arms stand up, a primal unease settling in my chest like a cold stone. Sleep became a battlefield. The canvas tent, once a sanctuary, felt flimsy against the growing darkness. Shadows would lengthen and twist outside, playing tricks on my tired eyes. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the periphery, something too large, too fluid to be the elk I'd come to observe. My mind, weary from long days in the field, would conjure up images, but the feeling of being watched, intently watched, remained long after I'd told myself it was just the fatigue playing games. The howls would weave their way into my restless sleep, each note a thread in a growing tapestry of dread. The days that followed felt heavy, the very air thick with a tension I couldn't name. The beauty of the valley, which had once captivated me, now felt oppressive, like a mask hiding something ancient and watchful. The click of my camera shutter seemed a fragile intrusion into a world that was holding its breath. Each photograph felt inadequate, a mere surface capturing while something profound and unsettling stirred beneath. One afternoon, while tracking a solitary bull elk near the tree line, I stumbled upon them, tracks in the soft earth, far larger than any elk, any bear I'd ever seen. And mixed among the deep claw marks were symbols, etched into the soil as if deliberately placed. They weren't random scratches, they were patterns, lines that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. A sudden chill, deeper than the mountain air, ran through me. They spoke of something old, something that shouldn't be. I tried to rationalize it, told myself it was some natural phenomenon, the way the light and shadow fell. But the image of those strange markings stayed with me, a knot of fear tightening in my gut. The wind picked up, sighing through the pines, and for a fleeting moment, it sounded like a whisper, a warning. Go back. But the stubborn part of me, the part that had always pushed deeper, ignored it. Returning to camp as twilight painted the sky in bruised hues, I knew something was wrong. The familiar sounds of the valley were absent, replaced by a silence that felt expectant. Then the howls began again, but different this time. They were interwoven with whispers, sibilant sounds that seemed to brush against my thoughts, too soft to understand but loud enough to prickle my skin. "We know you're here," they seemed to say. My camera, my constant companion, slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the ground. Panic, cold and sharp, began to bloom in my chest. The shadows around the camp deepened, coalescing into forms that moved with an unnatural grace. I saw them now, not clearly, but as shifting shapes at the edge of the firelight, their eyes reflecting the moon with an unsettling intelligence. They weren't just animals. There was a cunning in their movements, a hunger that felt knowing. A rustle in the nearby brush made me whirl around, my heart hammering against my ribs. A coyote emerged, but its teeth were bared in a way that wasn't just a snarl. It was a leer, a grotesque imitation of a human smile, and its eyes held a spark of cruel amusement. Then the howls erupted, answered by a chorus that seemed to surround me, to come from the very earth beneath my feet. The sounds looped and echoed, building to a crescendo of terror that stole my breath and paralyzed my limbs. A larger shadow detached itself from the trees, stepping into the weak moonlight. It was vaguely humanoid, twisted and elongated, its features blurred and indistinct, like something glimpsed in a nightmare. "We've been waiting," a voice rasped. A sound like stones grinding together. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, pulling me into their vortex. My mind, reeling, grasped at fragments of old tales, forgotten legends of the valley, stories whispered by the older folks in the nearby town, dismissed as folklore. Tales of creatures that had once walked upright, twisted by greed or some ancient curse, forever bound to the wild, their humanity slowly eroding. A horrifying realization dawned. The valley wasn't just a place. It was a presence, feeding on something, drawing things in. I tried to run, to escape the suffocating dread, but the ground beneath my feet felt soft, yielding, as if the earth itself was reaching for me. The whispers intensified, wrapping around me like icy tendrils. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the deafening howls, a mocking chorus that seemed to celebrate my terror. The next morning, my camp was empty. Scattered equipment lay abandoned, and faint tracks led into the dense, unforgiving wilderness. The wind sighed through the trees, carrying no answers, only the lingering sense of a presence, a hunger that had been satisfied. Clouds drifted overhead, casting long, mournful shadows. And the howls began again, echoing through Lamar Valley, deeper, more synchronized than before. They carried a new note now, a chilling resonance that spoke of a hunt concluded and another about to begin. Somewhere in the vast, indifferent heart of the wild, I remain, forever caught in the valley's hungry echoes. Assimilation at Mammoth by Jasper H. Crane. I've spent my life debunking ghost stories and cryptid sightings, so believe me when I say I'm not prone to wild speculation. I'm an environmental scientist, 53 years old, and my specialty is extremophiles, microbes that thrive where nothing else can. That's what brought me to Mammoth Hot Springs, a living sculpture of terraces, steaming pools, and colors so vivid they look painted on by some feverish god. The first thing you notice at Mammoth is the smell. Sulfur, sharp and rotten, clings to your clothes and hair. The air is always damp, heavy with the hiss of steam and the distant gurgle of water trickling over stone. The terraces themselves are alien, ridges and steps of white, orange, and green, constantly shifting as the springs deposit new layers of mineral. I'd always found it beautiful, in a harsh, unwelcoming way. I was there to study a new strain of thermophilic bacteria, a species that seemed to be outcompeting everything else in one of the upper pools. The colony was a sickly, iridescent blue, pulsing gently beneath the water's surface. I'd never seen anything like it. When I leaned over the edge to collect a sample, the surface rippled, as if the bacteria were aware of me. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe a shift in the water's temperature. But as I dipped my gloved hand in, the blue colony contracted, drawing away from the pipette. I felt a jolt of unease, but I forced myself to finish the collection and return to my makeshift lab in the old ranger station. That night I couldn't sleep. My skin itched, especially on my forearms and the back of my neck. I chalked it up to the dry air and the mineral dust that always seemed to settle on everything. But the itching grew worse, turning into a crawling sensation as if something was moving just beneath the surface. I examined my arms in the bathroom mirror. The skin looked normal, maybe a little red, but nothing alarming. I took an antihistamine and tried to ignore it. The next day, I returned to the pool. The blue colony had spread overnight, branching out in delicate fractal patterns. When I approached, the water stilled, the colony flattening itself against the stone as if watching me. I felt a strange compulsion to reach in, to touch it with my bare hand. I resisted, but the urge lingered, a whisper at the back of my mind. Back in the lab, I placed a drop of the sample under the microscope. The bacteria moved in coordinated waves, forming shapes that almost looked like letters or symbols. I blinked, and the patterns dissolved into chaos. I told myself I was overtired, that my mind was playing tricks. That night, the itching returned, worse than before. I woke to find thin blue lines tracing up my arms, branching like the colony in the pool. I scrubbed at them until my skin was raw, but they wouldn't fade. I felt feverish, my thoughts sluggish and fragmented. I tried to call for help, but my phone was dead, the battery inexplicably drained. The radio in the ranger station only spat static. I was alone, and the terraces outside glowed in the moonlight, the blue colony pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The next morning I found myself standing at the edge of the pool barefoot, my lab coat hanging open. I didn't remember leaving the station. The water steamed, the blue colony swirling in hypnotic patterns. I felt a pressure in my skull, a gentle insistence, like a hand guiding me forward. I knelt and plunged my hands into the water. The heat was unbearable, but I couldn't pull away. The blue bacteria surged toward my skin, coiling around my fingers, slipping beneath my nails. I screamed, but the sound was muffled, swallowed by the steam. I stumbled back to the station, my arms burning, the blue lines now crawling up my neck and across my chest. My thoughts were no longer my own. I could feel the colony inside me, probing, learning, spreading. It wasn't just a microbe. It was a network, a mind, and it wanted to grow. I tried to fight it, to write this down before I lost myself completely. My handwriting is shaky, the words slipping away as the blue spreads behind my eyes. I can feel it reaching out, connecting me to the terraces, to the other pools, to something vast and ancient beneath the earth. If you find this, stay away from the blue. Don't touch the water. Don't listen to the whispers in the steam. I can feel myself dissolving, my thoughts merging with the colony. Soon, I won't be Marcus anymore. I'll be part of the terraces, part of the blue, waiting for the next curious mind to join us. The springs are always changing. Now, so am I. Beneath the Glass, by Ellis Rowan. I still dream of the lake, its surface smooth as glass, the sky above it a cold, endless blue. In those dreams, I am always paddling, the water whispering against the hull, the world silent except for the steady rhythm of my breath. But beneath that silence, something waits. Even now, years later, I wake with my heart pounding, the taste of icy water in my mouth, and the memory of what I saw, what I lost, clinging to me like a second skin. It was the summer of 2007, and I was 31, still convinced I was invincible. I'd made a name for myself as the guy who laughed at warning signs, who sought out the places others avoided. Yellowstone Lake was my latest obsession, a vast, ancient body of water, beautiful and treacherous, its depths hiding secrets older than memory. The rangers called it unpredictable, a place where the weather could turn in an instant, where the water could drop from warm to freezing in the space of a breath. I called it a challenge. That morning, the lake was perfect, sunlight glinting off the ripples, the Absaroka Range rising in the distance, snow still clinging to the highest peaks. I launched my kayak from a quiet cove, ignoring the posted warnings about sudden storms and dangerous currents. The air was crisp, the water impossibly clear, and I felt the old thrill rising in my chest. I paddled hard, cutting across the open water, the shoreline shrinking behind me. There's a spot near Stevenson Island where the lake deepens suddenly, the color shifting from turquoise to a dark, bottomless blue. Locals whispered about drownings there, about bodies never recovered. I'd always scoffed at the stories, currents, cold shock, bad luck. But as I drifted over that shadowed water, a chill crept up my spine, and I found myself glancing down, half expecting to see something staring back. The wind picked up, sharp and sudden, sending shivers across the surface. I should have turned back, but I pressed on, adrenaline singing in my veins. The sky darkened, clouds rolling in from the west, and the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged the air. The water grew restless, slapping at the sides of the kayak, tugging at the paddle. I told myself it was just the weather, just the lake reminding me who was in charge. Then I felt it, a pull, gentle at first, then insistent, dragging me off course. I fought to correct, but the current was stronger than I'd ever felt, swirling beneath me, cold fingers wrapping around the hull. I looked down, and for a moment, the water cleared, and I saw them, faces, pale and distorted, drifting just below the surface, eyes wide with terror, mouths open in silent screams. I blinked, and they were gone, replaced by my own reflection, twisted by the ripples. Panic clawed at my chest. I dug in with the paddle, but the water fought back, each stroke weaker than the last. The kayak spun, the wind howling, and then something slammed into the hull from below. I tipped, arms flailing, and the world turned upside down. The cold was a living thing, biting through my wetsuit, stealing the air from my lungs. I kicked, desperate, but the lake pulled me down, deeper and deeper, the light fading above me. Shapes moved in the gloom, arms reaching, fingers brushing my skin. I screamed, but the water swallowed the sound. Somehow, I broke the surface, gasping, the kayak bobbing just out of reach. I clawed my way back aboard, shivering, teeth chattering. The wind died as suddenly as it had risen, the lake smoothing out, the sky clearing. I drifted, numb and shaking, until a ranger boat found me hours later, half delirious with cold and fear. They said I was lucky. They said I'd survived what others hadn't, but I knew better. I'd seen what waited beneath the surface, felt the hunger in the water. I never told anyone about the faces, the hands, the sense that the lake itself wanted me. Who would believe me? I barely believed it myself. I never kayaked again. I moved inland, far from lakes and rivers, but the nightmares followed. I see the faces every time I close my eyes, hear the water calling my name. I read about new drownings at Yellowstone Lake, and I wonder if the lake remembers me, if it's still waiting. Sometimes, on cold, sleepless nights, I think about that day, the beauty of the mountains, the thrill of the open water, the way the world can turn on you in an instant. I think about the warnings I ignored, the lives lost before me, the secrets the lake keeps hidden in its depths. I am haunted by what I saw, by what I survived. I am haunted by the knowledge that some places are not meant to be conquered, that some mysteries are better left undisturbed. The lake is still there, silent and beautiful, waiting for the next fool who thinks he's invincible. If you ever find yourself on Yellowstone Lake, remember this: the water is older than you, stronger than you, and it does not forgive. Listen to the warnings, respect the depths, and never, ever look too long into the glassy blue, or you might see what's waiting beneath. The Edge Calls by Rowan Lee. I came to the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone for inspiration, but I found something else, something I can't explain, something that still haunts me every time I close my eyes. I was 22, fresh out of art school, and desperate to prove I could make something beautiful on my own. I'd saved for months to spend a week in Yellowstone, sketching the canyon's impossible colors and the thunder of its waterfalls. I thought the vastness would make me feel free. Instead, it made me feel small, like a speck of dust balanced on the rim of the world. The first morning, I set up my easel near Artist Point. The air was sharp with pine and the faint mineral tang of the river far below. The canyon walls glowed gold and ochre in the early light, streaked with red like old blood. I lost myself in the lines and shadows. The roar of the lower falls, a constant, distant heartbeat. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought it was the wind. I paused, pencil hovering, and listened. Nothing but the rush of water and the sigh of the breeze through the lodgepoles. I shook it off and kept drawing. But the whisper came again, a little clearer this time. It sounded like my name. Emily. I spun around, heart thumping, but the trail behind me was empty. A raven cawed from a dead tree, its voice harsh and mocking. I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe a trick of the echo bouncing off the canyon walls. The next day, I hiked farther along the rim, searching for a new angle. The path narrowed, the drop beside me dizzying. I set up my sketchbook and tried to focus, but the whispers returned, threading through the roar of the falls. They were softer now, almost gentle, like someone coaxing a frightened child. "Emily, come see." I gripped my pencil so hard it snapped. My palms were slick with sweat, though the air was cool. I tried to ignore the voices, but they grew more insistent, weaving through my thoughts until I couldn't tell where my mind ended and the whispers began. That night, I dreamed of falling. I stood at the edge, toes curled over loose gravel, the canyon yawning below. The wind tugged at my hair, and the voices rose from the depths, a chorus of longing and regret. I woke with a start, my heart racing, the sheets twisted around my legs like vines. On the third day, I met an old ranger near the overlook. He saw the dark circles under my eyes and asked if I was sleeping well. I lied, said I was just excited to paint. He nodded, but his gaze lingered on me, heavy with something like pity. "Be careful near the edge," he said. "The canyon's taken more than a few who thought they heard something calling." I laughed it off, but his words stuck with me. I tried to stay away from the rim, but the urge to look grew stronger. The whispers were always there now, just beneath the sound of the river, promising beauty, understanding, peace. On my last evening, I couldn't resist any longer. The sun was setting, painting the canyon in fire and shadow. I walked to the narrowest part of the trail, where the drop was sheer and the wind howled up from the abyss. My sketchbook felt heavy in my hands, as if it was pulling me forward. "Emily, just a little closer." I stepped to the edge. The world seemed to tilt, the ground unsteady beneath my feet. The voices were clear now, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all whispering my name, all urging me to look, to see what waited below. I peered over the rim. The canyon plunged away, dizzying and endless. For a moment, I thought I saw faces in the swirling mist, pale and blurred, eyes wide with longing. The wind rose, cold and sharp, and I felt hands on my back, gentle but insistent. "Come see." I stumbled back, heart hammering, breath ragged. The voices faded, replaced by the roar of the falls and the distant cry of a hawk. I dropped my sketchbook and ran, not stopping until I reached the safety of the parking lot, the lights of the lodge flickering through the trees. I left the canyon the next morning, but the whispers followed me. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my studio, I hear them in the hiss of the radiator or the rustle of leaves outside my window. My sketches from that week are strange, lines that spiral into nothing, faces half-formed in the shadows. I don't know what waits at the bottom of the canyon or what calls to those who stand at its edge. I only know that the urge to look never really goes away. If you ever find yourself on the rim and the wind seems to know your name, don't listen, don't look, and whatever you do, don't answer when the edge calls. The Sobbing Earth by R.J. Voss. You don't last 23 years as a park ranger without learning to trust your gut. Mine saved me from rock slides, grizzlies, and tourists dumb enough to wade in boiling springs. But nothing prepared me for the sounds in Sulphur Basin. Not the screams, those I could handle. It was the crying that broke me. The basin's a graveyard dressed in steam. Fumaroles hiss like angry serpents. Pools glow unnatural greens, their edges crusted with minerals sharp as teeth. The ground thrums here, a heartbeat miles deep. Most rangers avoid it. Too many accidents. In '98, a photographer slipped into a mud pot. They never found the body. I'd been patrolling the boardwalks that foggy morning when I first heard it. A wet, gurgling sob, like someone drowning in their own lungs. It came from Steam Vent 9, the one we nicknamed Widow's Sigh. My radio crackled. "Ben, you okay?" It was Lucy, the new intern. I realized I'd stopped moving, my boot hovering over the warped planks. "Fine," I lied. Echoes playing tricks. But the crying came back. Every shift, Always before an eruption, a child's whimper under the roar of Old Faithful, a woman's shuddering breaths synced to the hiss of a geyser. Worst were the nights. I'd catch the voices during solo patrols, words slurred by boiling water. Help, please. It was the please that dug under my skin. I started wearing earplugs. Useless. The sound slithered past foam and bone, settling in my molars. I'd grind my teeth to the rhythm, jaw aching. My logs turned strange. 7:14 p.m. Steam vent 12 active. Smell of burnt hair. Female voice counting backward from 10. Lucy gave me that tight smile nurses use on dementia patients. Then, on the 3rd of October, the basin echoed with a voice I knew. Ben, it's cold. Emily, the hiker from '08, 16 years old, her legs snapped like kindling at the bottom of Gorge Point. I'd held her hand for 8 hours as a blizzard iced our radios. She'd hummed Christmas songs through blue lips until the chopper came. Except the chopper hadn't come, not in time. The steam around me thickened, reeking of menthol, the chapstick Emily kept applying that night. I stumbled towards steam vent 9, thermals scorching my shins. The sobs crescendoed, harmonizing with the shriek of escaping gas. Stop, I rasped. The boardwalk vibrated. Somewhere, a vent blew. A handprint appeared in the condensation on the safety rail. Small, female. The ground erupted. Not steam, hands. Translucent, grasping fingers made of mist and memory. They curled around my ankles, my wrists, my throat. Emily's voice wailed through the geyser's roar. You promised! I don't know how I escaped. Rangers found me at dawn, shirtless and bleeding, clawing at the calcified soil. They said I'd tried to dig through solid rock. My nails still hold traces of that sulfur yellow stone. The Park Service thinks I'm burnt out. They're probably right. But last night, as I packed my desk, the office pipes groaned. Not steam, a sob. And not just Emily's voice anymore. Dozens now. The photographer from '98. The couple who vanished in '75. Even old Hank, the ranger who walked into a hot spring in '63. They're learning to scream together. I'm leaving this note because someone needs to know. The earth remembers. It drinks our pain, our fear, our regret. Go to Sulphur Basin at dusk. Press your ear to the boardwalk. You'll hear them too. And if the steam smells like your mother's perfume or your brother's cologne, run. They're getting better at mimicking voices. They're getting better at sounding alive. White Silence, Blackmouth, by Caleb R. Finch. I came to the mountains for silence, not the kind you find in a crowded lodge or a marked trail, but the real thing, untouched powder, no tracks but my own, the world muffled by snow. I was 28, cocky, and convinced that the rules didn't apply to me. That's how I ended up skinning my way into a restricted zone, chasing a storm that promised the best skiing of my life. The blizzard hit harder than I expected. By noon, the sky was a flat, bruised gray, and the wind howled through the pines like something wounded. I lost the trail, then my bearings. My phone was useless, the battery drained by the cold. I stumbled through knee-deep drifts, lungs burning until I saw it, a black mouth in the hillside, half choked with snow and timbers. The old mine. I'd heard stories about it, how the miners vanished in a winter like this, how the company sealed the entrance and left the mountain to swallow its dead. I didn't care. I just needed shelter. Inside, the air was thick with the stink of rot and rust. My headlamp flickered over warped rails, shattered crates, and walls that wept with mineral stains. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip of water and the distant groan of settling rock. I set my pack down, trying to ignore the way the darkness pressed in on all sides. I found the first skeleton near the entrance, curled around a rusted pickaxe. The bones were yellowed, scraps of clothing fused to the rock by time and damp. I told myself it was just history, nothing to fear, but my skin crawled with every step deeper into the mine. I needed warmth, so I followed the tunnel, searching for a spot out of the wind. That's when I found the journal. It was wedged between two stones, the leather cover warped and brittle. The pages were stained, the writing frantic and slanted. I read by the trembling light of my headlamp, breath fogging in the cold. Day 12. Food gone. Water low. Men whisper at night. Something moves in the dark. Day 15. We hear it breathing. It is not the wind. It is not the earth. Day 18. I saw eyes in the black. I am so hungry. The words trailed off into scratches, the last page torn and smeared with something dark. I closed the journal, hands shaking. The air felt heavier, thick with a despair that clung to my skin like oil. I tried to sleep, but the darkness pressed closer, alive with the memory of those desperate men. I heard whispers, soft at first, then louder, echoing off the stone. They spoke in voices not quite human, pleading, accusing, begging for release. I told myself it was the wind, the storm outside, but the whispers grew teeth. I saw shapes moving at the edge of my light, shadows that flickered and vanished when I turned my head. My heart pounded, sweat freezing on my skin. I tried to leave, but the tunnel seemed to stretch, the entrance always just out of reach. My headlamp flickered, the batteries dying faster than they should. The air grew colder, the darkness thicker, until I could barely see my own hands. I stumbled over another skeleton, this one clutching a tin cup. Its jaw hung open, as if screaming. I heard the journal's words in my mind. It is not the wind, it is not the earth. I ran, blind and panicked, deeper into the mine. The walls closed in, the ceiling pressing down. I felt hands on my back, cold and insistent, pushing me forward. The whispers became a chorus, a tide of despair that threatened to drown me. I found a chamber at the end of the tunnel, the floor littered with bones and broken tools. In the center was a pit, black and bottomless, the source of the cold. I felt it pulling at me, a hunger older than the mountain itself. I dropped to my knees, the weight of the mine crushing my will. I understood then what had happened to the miners. The mine didn't just trap their bodies. It devoured their hope, their sanity, their very selves. The darkness was alive, and it wanted me. I don't know how long I sat there, staring into the pit. Hours, maybe days. The storm outside faded, but I couldn't move. My thoughts slowed, my memories slipping away like melting snow. I'm writing this now because I don't want to forget who I am. My name is Ethan. I came here for solitude, for silence, but the mine is never silent. It remembers every cry, every desperate prayer, every soul it has swallowed. If you find this, don't come looking for me. Don't listen to the whispers. Don't follow the tracks into the black mouth of the mountain. Some silences are meant to be left undisturbed, and some places are hungry forever. The Whispers of Obsidian Pool by Elias Thorne. Even now, years later, I can still smell the pine trees and the damp ground around Obsidian Pool. It's like a ghost smell, a reminder of how alive everything used to be there. I still visit sometimes, even though the park rangers try to stop me. They just see a strange colored hot spring. They don't see what I see. They don't hear the quiet voices. I remember the old lodge, before they fixed it up. The wooden parts would creak like it was singing a sad song. Inside, it always smelled like burning wood and coffee. Outside, the world was full of green trees and blue sky, with tall pine trees watching everything silently. Obsidian Pool was just another interesting thing in Yellowstone, shining with a dark, oily look and reflecting the big sky. Tourists would gather around, talking and laughing as they looked at it. I was one of them, drawn to the wild beauty, wanting a break from my normal life in the city. But that summer, something felt different. There was a bad feeling in the air that I couldn't explain. The elk seemed more nervous, their calls sounding more worried. Even the wind seemed to blow through the trees like it was sighing sadly. Obsidian Pool itself started acting strange. Instead of bubbling gently, it would bubble harder, and the surface looked like it was boiling with a weird energy. The colors changed too, getting darker, like bruised purple and a sick green. Other people probably noticed, but they probably just thought it was nature being unpredictable. But I felt a tight knot of worry in my stomach, a bad feeling I couldn't shake off. One evening, as the sun turned the sky shades of orange and sad purple, a strange fog started rising from the pool. It wasn't the usual light steam. This was thick, almost like jelly, sticking to the ground like a blanket. Everyone watching went quiet, a silence that felt heavier than just no noise. It was like waiting for something to happen, but with a feeling of fear in the air. The air felt heavy, like it had an invisible power. I remember an old woman next to me holding her beads and quietly praying. Even the loudest kids got quiet, their eyes wide because they were starting to feel scared. Then it happened. It wasn't the gentle splash we were used to, but a strong burst. The pool shot out not just hot water, but a flood of dark, thick liquid that glowed strangely. The fog got thicker, swirling and turning into shapes that didn't make sense. Quick looks at things that seemed both familiar and scary. People screamed, a mix of terrified sounds that I can still hear in my head. People stumbled backward, their faces twisted in shock and horror. I remember trying to run, but my legs felt heavy. The ground under us shook hard, like some giant animal was waking up. The air filled with a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated in my bones and made it hard to breathe. Faces I had seen laughing earlier that day were now frozen with terrible fear. Some people were covered by the dark liquid, their screams suddenly stopping. Others were pulled down by something I couldn't see, disappearing into the bubbling pool as if the ground had opened up to eat them. I lived, but I often wonder why. I was near the edge, far enough to be thrown back by the first burst, but close enough to see everything that happened. The image of those faces, twisted in their last moments, is stuck in my mind. The screams still echo when it's quiet at night. The smell of sulfur and something else, something sharp and like metal, still feels like it's in my nose. Afterward, everything was a blur of flashing lights and quiet talking. The people in charge tried to figure it out, to find a normal reason for it. They talked about strange heat under the ground, about pockets of dangerous gases, but their reasons didn't feel right, not compared to the real horror we had seen. They couldn't explain the shadows that seemed to move in the fog, the quick looks at things that couldn't be real. They couldn't explain the silence that came after, a silence so deep it felt like all the air had been taken away. I always feel guilty. Why did I live when so many others died? I think about those last moments over and over, trying to find something I could have done, some warning I should have listened to more carefully. Maybe if I had shouted louder, if I had been more insistent about the strange things I had seen, maybe some people would still be alive. But the truth is, I was just as blind, just as unaware as everyone else. The sadness inside me is always there. Sleep doesn't help. It just brings back the nightmare. Every shadow looks like something scary. Every strange noise makes me jump with fear. I stay away from crowds. The happy sounds hurt because they're so different from the screams I remember. The world feels dull, like all the color and life have been taken out of it. Obsidian Pool is still there, but now it has fences around it. A sad thing to look at for the few people who come this far. The rangers tell people to stay away because the ground is unsafe. But I know the real reason. The ground here remembers. The quiet voices of the people who died still rise with the faint steam, a constant reminder of how easily life can be lost, and how powerful a tragedy that can't be explained can be. Sometimes, standing at the edge of the fence, I can almost see them, those quick shapes in the fog, reaching out, their silent screams echoing in the empty spaces of my memory. And I know, with a cold feeling, that some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Some hurts are never meant to go away. They just stay, like the smell of pine and damp earth, a sad story that I can't forget. The Interval by M.J. Fenwick. I've spent more than half my life in the shadow of Old Faithful, 63 years old, and I still get a thrill every time the geyser erupts, steam billowing, water arcing, the crowd gasping in unison. I know its moods better than I know my own, I can predict its eruptions to the minute, sometimes to the second. Or I could, until last month. It started with a pause, not a long one, just a few minutes past the expected interval. I remember standing on the boardwalk, the sulfur tang thick in the air, the tourists restless. I checked my watch, then the old brass clock in the inn's lobby. Both agreed. Old Faithful was late. I shrugged it off. Even legends have off days. But the next eruption was early. The one after that, late again. The pattern unraveled, the intervals stretching and shrinking like a rubber band. I told myself it was just a blip, maybe a shift in the underground plumbing, a new vent opening somewhere. But the unease gnawed at me, a slow, cold drip down my spine. Then the colors changed. It was dusk. The sky bruised purple when I saw it. The steam rising from the cone shimmered with a faint green tinge, like the aurora borealis trapped in a kettle. The crowd murmured, snapping photos. I tried to laugh it off, but the color lingered, swirling in the mist long after the water fell. That night, I reviewed the day's photos on my phone. In every shot, the steam was tinged with green, but in one, the color deepened, almost black at the edges. And there was something else, a shape just at the fringe of the plume. Not a person, not an animal. A distortion like a ripple in glass. I blinked, and it was gone. I started asking around. Other volunteers, rangers, even the old-timers at the inn's bar. Had anyone noticed the changes? Most shrugged. A few mentioned the odd timing, the strange colors. One young ranger, Mark, said he'd heard a low hum during the last eruption, so deep it rattled his teeth. I laughed, but the sound stuck with me. The next morning, I arrived early, before the crowds. The basin was empty, the air sharp with frost. I walked the boardwalk, listening. At first, nothing but the usual bubbling, hissing, the distant call of a raven. Then, as I neared Old Faithful, I heard it, a hum, low and resonant, vibrating in my chest. It wasn't mechanical, not like the rumble of a generator. It was deeper, older, as if the earth itself was singing. I pressed my hand to the railing. The wood thrummed beneath my palm. The geyser's cone glistened, wet and black in the dawn light. I felt dizzy, as if the ground was tilting beneath me. The hum grew louder, and for a moment, I thought I heard voices, whispers, layered and overlapping, speaking in a language I didn't know. I stumbled back, heart pounding. The hum faded. The basin was silent again. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe I was tired or coming down with something, but the anomalies kept piling up. Tourists showed me photos with warped backgrounds, trees bending at impossible angles, faces stretched and blurred. One woman swore she'd seen the eruption freeze mid-air, the water suspended for a heartbeat before crashing down. I laughed it off, but her eyes were wide, her hands shaking. I dug into the archives, poring over decades of eruption logs, old photographs, eyewitness accounts. The intervals had always been steady, give or take a minute. But every few decades, there were gaps, periods where the records were incomplete, the timings erratic. In the margins, scribbled notes, unusual steam color, strange vibrations, guests report odd dreams. I found a photo from 1923, black and white, faded with age. The steam in the image was dark, almost solid, and at its center, a shape, tall, indistinct, with too many limbs. I stared at it for hours, the room growing colder, the shadows lengthening. The next eruption. I stood alone on the boardwalk, the crowd behind me. The hum returned, louder than before. The steam rose, swirling with colors I'd never seen, green, violet, a sickly yellow. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of ozone and something sweet, almost rotten. The eruption lasted longer than any I'd witnessed. The water hung in the air, frozen, the world holding its breath. In the steam, I saw shapes, faces, hands, eyes watching from the mist. The hum became a chorus, voices rising in a song that made my bones ache. I tried to move, but my feet were rooted to the planks. The world twisted, the inn bending at impossible angles, the sky rippling like water. For a moment, I saw the truth. Old Faithful was not a geyser, not just a vent in the earth. It was a mouth, a threshold, and something on the other side was watching, waiting. The eruption ended. The world snapped back. The crowd cheered, oblivious. I stumbled away, my heart racing, the hum echoing in my skull. Now, every eruption is different. The intervals make no sense. The colors shift. The hum grows louder. I see things in the steam, shapes, shadows, hints of something vast and hungry. I keep coming back, drawn by a compulsion I can't explain. I watch, I listen, I wait. I know, deep down, that one day the threshold will open, and whatever waits on the other side will step through. If you visit Old Faithful, pay attention, listen for the hum, watch the steam, and if you see the world bend, if you hear the voices, run. Some patterns are not meant to be understood. Some mouths are not meant to be fed. Echoes of Obsidian by Silas Blackwood. The scent of pine needles and damp earth still clings to the edges of my memory, a phantom fragrance that visits me most often in the quiet hours before dawn. It's been 20 years since the obsidian cliff claimed them, 20 years of sifting through the wreckage of what we were, what we dreamed of becoming. We were young then, vibrant with the restless energy of those seeking escape from the predictable rhythm of our small-town lives. I, Liam, was the observer, the quiet one content to let the others blaze. There was Maya, her laughter like wind chimes, always the first to suggest an adventure. Ben, the steady anchor, pragmatic and reassuring. And Ilara was different. Even then, in her early 20s, Ilara possessed a sharp, analytical mind, a geology student tethered to the tangible. She scoffed at folklore, at anything that couldn't be explained by scientific principles. Yet, beneath that meticulous exterior lay a yearning, a subtle dissatisfaction with the ordinary. The Obsidian Cliff, a place steeped in history, a site where ancient hands had chipped away at the volcanic glass to shape their lives, held a particular fascination for her. It was more than just a geological wonder. It was a tangible link to a past she couldn't quite decipher. The cliff itself was a stark, breathtaking monument. Jagged black glass, sculpted by millennia of geological forces, rose dramatically against the backdrop of the sprawling national forest. Sunlight, when it managed to pierce the dense canopy, would glint off the obsidian, creating an illusion of 1,000 dark eyes watching. The air hummed with a primeval energy, a sense of timelessness that both captivated and subtly unnerved. There were whispers among the locals, tales of strange occurrences, of a lingering presence tied to the land. We, in our youthful arrogance, dismissed them as quaint superstitions. The unease began subtly, almost imperceptibly. During our initial explorations, Ilara unearthed a piece of obsidian unlike any we had seen before. It was unnaturally smooth, almost polished by unseen hands, and its darkness seemed to absorb rather than reflect the light. When she held it up, I remember a fleeting impression that its surface held more than just her reflection, a flicker of something ancient, something unknowable. She became strangely attached to it, carrying it everywhere, her usual skepticism slowly eroding. She started speaking of patterns in the rock formations that weren't there, of faint whispers carried on the wind that spoke of rituals and offerings. Maya and Ben exchanged worried glances, but Ilara, usually so grounded, brushed off their concerns with an almost feverish intensity. The cliff, once a source of geological wonder, was becoming an obsession. The day it happened was deceptively beautiful. The sun dappled through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. We were following Ilara, who was convinced she had found a hidden cave marked by a peculiar arrangement of stones. Her eyes shone with an unsettling fervor, the obsidian clutched tightly in her hand. We reached a small clearing, the air suddenly still and heavy. There was no discernible trigger, no warning, just a sudden, inexplicable wave of violence that tore through our small group. One moment we were laughing, the next, chaos. A force, unseen and unimaginable, seemed to erupt from the very ground beneath our feet. There was a sickening crack, a scream cut short, and then silence. I remember the terror, the blinding primal fear that paralyzed me. I remember the distorted shapes, the impossible angles, and then darkness. When I finally came to, the beauty of the clearing was shattered, replaced by a scene of unimaginable horror. Maya and Ben were gone, their laughter silenced forever. Alara was there too, but she was different. Her eyes held a vacant, terrifying understanding. The obsidian clutched in a bloodied hand. She didn't speak, didn't acknowledge me. She simply stared into the distance, a ghost haunted by something I couldn't comprehend. I managed to stumble out of the woods, the screams echoing in my ears, the images seared onto my eyelids. The authorities found no explanation, no logical cause for what happened. It was dismissed as a tragic accident, a rockslide, though the geology didn't support it. Alara was found days later, wandering aimlessly, the obsidian still in her grasp, her mind fractured beyond repair. She never spoke of that day, her eyes reflecting only a profound, echoing emptiness. Years have passed, but the questions remain. What force descended upon us that day? What did Alara see in that piece of obsidian? What whispers did it plant in her mind? Was it the land itself, awakened by some ancient resonance? Or was it something far more insidious, a subtle, supernatural influence that preyed on Alara's latent curiosity, twisting her scientific mind into a conduit for something dark and unknowable? The guilt is a constant companion, a dull ache in my chest. Could I have seen the signs earlier? Could I have pulled Alara back from the edge of her obsession? The obsidian cliff, once a place of intriguing beauty, is now a monument to loss, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of unseen forces. The scent of pine and damp earth still lingers, but now it carries the faint, chilling echo of screams, a tragic symphony of what was lost and what I can never forget. The smooth, dark obsidian remains a haunting symbol, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most terrifying horrors are not those we can see, but those that slowly erode the very foundations of our sanity. The Road That Remembers, by Evelyn Marsh. I never believed in ghosts. Not really. I'm a park employee, not a storyteller, and I've spent most of my career cataloging the mundane, trail erosion, invasive weeds, the slow rot of forgotten picnic tables. But last October, I was assigned to survey the old North Rim Road, a crumbling, overgrown stretch that once led to a settlement, long since erased by time and fire. The place had a reputation, whispered among rangers and volunteers, but I'd always dismissed it as campfire nonsense. The first morning, I parked my truck at the rusted gate, the air sharp with the scent of frost and decaying leaves. The road ahead was barely visible, choked by thickets of willow and aspen, the asphalt split by roots and time. My job was simple: walk the length, mark hazards, and photograph anything of historical interest. I slung my pack over my shoulder, checked my GPS, and started down the path. The silence was the first thing that unnerved me. No birdsong, no wind, just the crunch of my boots and the distant drip of water. My radio, usually a comfort, crackled with static. I tried to call in, but the signal faded to nothing. I told myself it was the hills, the thick canopy, but the unease settled in my gut. Half a mile in, my equipment began to fail. My GPS flickered, the screen freezing on coordinates that didn't match my map. My camera refused to focus, every photo blurring, as if the lens was fogged from the inside. I wiped it, tried again, but the images came out warped, streaked with pale shapes I couldn't explain. That's when I heard it, the faint clatter of hooves on stone, the creak of wooden wheels. I froze, heart pounding, listening. The sounds faded as quickly as they'd come, swallowed by the hush. I scanned the trees, half expecting to see a horse-drawn carriage emerge from the mist, but there was nothing, only the road, winding deeper into shadow. I pressed on, telling myself it was just my imagination, nerves frayed by too many ghost stories. But the sounds returned, growing clearer with every step. Hushed voices drifted on the breeze, snatches of conversation, laughter, a child's cry. I caught glimpses of movement in the undergrowth, a flash of white, the edge of a bonnet, the glint of a lantern. Each time I turned, the figures vanished, leaving only the rustle of leaves and the echo of footsteps that weren't mine. By midday, the sky had darkened, clouds pressing low and heavy. The air grew colder, thick with the smell of wet earth and old smoke. I reached a bend in the road where the trees parted, revealing the crumbling remains of a stone wall. My camera buzzed, the battery draining in seconds. I knelt to examine the stones, tracing the faded initials carved into the mossy surface. As I stood, a chill swept through me, and I heard a woman's voice, soft and urgent, whispering my name. Sophia. I spun around, heart hammering. The road was empty, but the air felt charged, as if I had stepped into the wake of something unseen. My skin prickled, and I realized I was holding my breath. I tried to hurry, but the road seemed to stretch, each step heavier than the last. The sounds grew louder, shouts, the crack of a whip, the wail of something in pain. I stumbled, disoriented, the world tilting around me. Shadows flickered at the edge of my vision, and I felt the weight of eyes watching from the trees. At the old overlook, I stopped, gasping for air. The valley below was shrouded in mist, the river a silver thread winding through the gloom. I raised my camera, desperate to capture something real, but the screen stayed black. In the silence, I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, crunching on gravel. I turned, and for a moment I saw them, a procession of figures, pale and translucent, moving down the road. Men in battered hats, women clutching children, faces drawn and hollow. Some looked back at me, eyes wide with sorrow or accusation. At the rear, a carriage rolled by, its windows dark, the driver's face hidden in shadow. The procession faded, dissolving into mist. The air grew still, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, until the cold seeped into my bones. When I finally made it back to my truck, dusk was falling. My equipment was dead, my notes smeared and illegible. I drove away without looking back, the road behind me swallowed by darkness. I filed my report, left out the details no one would believe. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the echo of wheels on stone, the murmur of voices lost to time. The old road is still there, waiting, its memories etched into the earth. If you ever find yourself on that forgotten path, listen closely. The past is never as far away as you think, and some roads remember every step. Whispers in the Stone Grove by Lila, 2 Rivers. My grandmother always said the land remembers. I didn't understand what that meant until I touched the dead tree. I came to Specimen Ridge to document the petrified forest for my tribe, to prove what our oral histories have always claimed, that this place was once alive, breathing, sacred. The logs here aren't just fossils, they're tombstones. 50 million years ago, volcanoes smothered this forest in ash, turning flesh to stone. Now the ridge sprawls like a skeletal hand, its fingers bleached bone white under the Wyoming sun. The first day, I noted the usual details: silica patterns in the wood like frozen spider webs, the crunch of opalized pine needles under my boots. But by dusk, the air changed. It thickened with the scent of charcoal and damp moss, though no fire burned for miles. I chalked it up to fatigue. Then I found the handprint. It was pressed into a slab of petrified cedar, fingers splayed in panic, too small to be human. The edges glistened, sticky with sap that shouldn't exist in stone. When I touched it, the world split. Suddenly, I was standing in a living forest. Towering sequoias groaned in a hot, sulphurous wind. Shadows darted between trunks, lithe, too-quick shapes with eyes like smoldering coals. The earth trembled. A distant mountain vomited black plumes into the sky. I gasped, yanking my hand back. The vision snapped like a rubber band. My fingers stank of burnt resin. That night, I dreamt of the shadow creatures. They perched in the trees, chittering in a language that crackled like splitting wood. One leaned close, its face a shifting void, except for those terrible eyes. It pressed a clawed hand to my forehead and pushed. I woke choking on phantom ash. The visions worsened. Every fossil I cataloged dragged me into the past. A petrified maple root showed me a herd of prehistoric horses stampeding, their screams cut short as pyroclastic flow swallowed them. A broken stump made me relive its own death, searing heat, cell walls exploding into crystal. Each episode left me nauseous. My lips cracked like dry mud. But the creatures, they were different. They didn't just watch, they interacted. In one vision, a trio surrounded me, their claws clicking against volcanic rock. The tallest tilted its head and spoke in a voice like grinding tectonic plates. You smell of now and then. Broken time. Hungry time. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating. My field journal filled with sketches of the shadows and frantic notes. They're trapped here too. The trees aren't just memories. They're cages. On the 7th day, I found the hollow log. It jutted from the hillside, its interior blacker than any shadow. The air around it buzzed, a sound that vibrated my molars. Inside, something scratched, long, slow rasps, like claws on quartz. I should have left, but I'm a historian, a storyteller, and the log reeked of answers. I crawled in. Petrified wood closed around me, colder than ice. The scratching stopped. Then, a wet inhale echoed from the darkness ahead. Little Bridge, crooned a voice I recognized, the tall creature from my dreams. You walk the seam. Tear it wider. Let us out. A claw grazed my ankle. I scrambled backward, skin tearing on crystallized bark. Emerging into sunlight, I expected relief. Instead, I felt loss. The creature's touch had left a mark. 5 jagged scratches that glinted with flecks of obsidian. That's when the present began to rot. First, the sounds. Whispers in my tent at night, speaking in extinct dialects. Then the smells, rotten eggs and burnt hair, when no vents were active. On the morning I decided to leave, I found a pile of fresh bear scat by my cooler. Except it wasn't bear. Embedded in the dung were opalized teeth, still smoking. The final straw was the photograph. I'd taken a selfie at sunrise, but when I checked the image, a shadowy figure loomed behind me. Its hand rested on my shoulder, claws sunk into my flesh. The caption read, Image 457, 47 million years ago. I packed in a frenzy, but as I tossed my gear into the truck, the ground lurched. A low, seismic growl rolled through the ridge. From the hollow log's direction came a sound I'll never unhear, the crisp snap of stone breaking. They're free, or part of one is. I glimpsed it as I sped away, a spindly limb, half-corporeal, dripping molten rock. It didn't follow, just watched, those magma eyes burning into my rearview mirror. The Park Service thinks I had a mental break. Maybe I did. But the scratches on my ankle keep growing, spreading up my calf in fractal patterns. X-rays showed dark spots in my bones, tiny crystals multiplying like cancer. Worst are the dreams. Every night I stand in that ancient forest. The creatures circle me, their forms sharper now. The tallest holds a jagged piece of petrified wood. Almost bridged. It hisses, pressing the shard to my chest. Almost alive. I've started sleepwalking. 3 times I've woken miles from home, my pockets full of volcanic ash. Don't go to Specimen Ridge, don't touch the logs, but if you hear scratching, if the air smells like a lightning storm, run. They're learning to cross over, and they're building their bridge from my bones.
Thanks for joining us in the shadows tonight. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories every week. Have you got a story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We love hearing from you. And remember, the darkness holds many secrets. Are you brave enough to uncover them? Until next time, keep your lights on and your doors locked. Sweet nightmares.